Hello everyone, welcome to the Leesburg Public Library Show. I'm Tom Wilcox. I'm an adult services librarian at the library, and I'm here with Miss Glorianne Fahs, and she's actually president of the Leesburg Heritage Society and a curator at the museum. And today we're going to discuss a lot of things involving Leesburg history and the public library and genealogy, as well as the museum and a lot of things. So let's get to it. So anyway, Glorianne, we have an interesting program that you thought up and you hold at the library called Genie Rookies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Genie Rookies was begun in February, and it really is part of the Kinseekers' objectives, which is to assist members in learning genealogical work. You know, many of the newcomers don't know what to do, and they wonder, and they can come. I know you have someone that comes once a week who answers questions, but this is another format for people asking questions. So it's a group to help other people or help the newcomers, really.
Okay, that's good. And so anyway, you know, someone's probably watching this for the first time and didn't know about Genie Rookies. I mean, they say, well, I'd sort of like to go, but what do I bring? Well,
you should bring your questions. And if you have done some work, you should bring the information to share with others who are new, so that everyone will have some general ideas. You know, I meant this as a means for newcomers to learn, and I know you have classes, and I would like some of the classes people to follow up, you know, with the Genie Rookies. And I envision the newcomers coming, asking questions with, you know, experienced people also sitting in and answering some of their questions.
Oh yeah, and I should also add that usually someone, either I or my supervisor, Carol Anderson, we actually try to sit in every single chance we can get, so that if anyone has a question about how their question can be answered within the confines of the library collection, we can actually be on hand to deliver that. And Glorianne brought up another thing. We have a lot of different programs. In January, we're starting a new beginner's genealogy series, which you can call up about and find out how to join it. And if you don't know anything about genealogy, that's one of the things you do. Another one is coming a little closer. It's called Genealogy After Hours, and that's going to be Friday, November 16th, and from 5 to 8. And it costs $10, and but they serve light refreshments and have a speaker. We are collecting for that now, so if you think you'd like to come, definitely you know, call us up at the library. We'll tell you all about it. So let's keep going.
Okay, but, well, I don't want you to forget that our lineage societies will be there represented in order to advise people how to join lineage societies.
Yeah, that's very true, because the DAR will be there, Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the American Revolution, several others like the Colonial Dames, Daughters of 1812. You'd be surprised how many lineage groups there are. But if you ever thought about wanting to join one, this is the time to come and ask them about it, because they're all there. But I was going to ask about the Genie Rookies. Can you tell us some of the things, one or two of the things that you actually discussed at your meetings?
Well, a lot of people say, what do I do with my materials? And I developed a way of organizing the direct line, mainly for the lineage societies that we talked about. But I call it scrapbooking. But I think it helps some of the newcomers realize, you know, they have more to think about than all these cousins all over. Your direct line is really the most important in what you're really trying to do. And so I have a scrapbook with everything about each individual in my direct line, that is male, female, each generation. And then we also discussed publishing. One of our early members, and he's been doing this 40 years, you know, Bob Hedgecock.
Oh, yeah.
He came in and talked about publishing, or publishing everything you collect, and or just your own story, which is very important too, because you want to write this for your family, for your children, your grandchildren, and all. And so I did a lot of writing earlier before I got involved with other things.
Okay, that's good. But anyway, can you tell us a particular research problem somebody brought up and laid on the table and said, you know, I'm having trouble, how can I be helped?
Well, something I can relate to very well is, how do I find my grandfather? I never did find my grandfather. But anyway, this person said, how can I find my grandfather? And this lady's about 80. And the new census came out, the 1940 census, and I advised her to look in the census, and she could find herself in the same census, and then she could find her parents and the answers that they gave to questions, which would lead her to her grandparents. Because in the census they ask age, they ask where were you born, where were your parents born, where did you live? In 1940 they asked where did you live 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So all those questions really help a lot. And then, you know, you can continue on after you find your parents and grandparents.
Oh yeah, you can find out a lot of things in this census. Like I found out my father in 1935 was living in Fort Armstrong in Honolulu, Hawaii, because he was in the armed services, the U.S. Army. So you can find out a lot of things. I sort of knew he was there because I remember him saying it, but I didn't know any particulars. But you can get a lot of stuff.
Well, I found myself immediately because I knew where we lived when I was born, and I was 2 days old.
Okay. Yeah, you were lucky because actually, you know, you and this lady, this 80-year-old lady, have a rare distinction because only 21 million Americans in that census are still living.
Oh.
Out of something like 135 or million that they counted. So that's quite a distinction.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but so anyway, let's move on to the mothership, as it were, kin seekers. What is about kin seekers? What do they do?
Well, Kin Seekers is a nonprofit group, you know, and we meet September through June, and we present educational programs and share information with each other. We also publish a quarterly newsletter to give people information about what we are going to do in the future, and to remind them that they should show up for meetings.
Yeah, they also have a web presence, people, so just look them up. And now, you know, can you tell us a little bit of what kind of support the library gives to kin seekers?
Well, it's been well over 30 years that there's been a very strong relationship between the kin seekers and the library. And we are so happy to be in the new library meeting place because that's one of the important things that the library provides, is the meeting place. And also the library has our files and all of our genealogical materials that we collected over the years, as well as the Project Collect, which was done by the very earliest kin seekers.
Yeah, in case you never heard of that, if you happen to have ancestors who were Lake or Sumter County residents, we actually have this card file that will help you find things like wills, deeds, marriage records, and it's all arranged alphabetically by the name of the person. And it doesn't have the actual documents, but it'll tell you where they are. And we also, on the other side, have a 30-year supply of local obituaries. And the newspapers only go back, the Daily Commercial online goes back to 2001. The Orlando Sentinel only goes back to 1985. So if you have something from before that, that's definitely call us up and we'll try and help you. But, and very important, do you have to be a member to attend Kin Seekers?
No, visitors are always welcomed and encouraged, you know. I mention it to anyone I encounter. Come to Kin Seekers and meet people who share your hobby.
Oh yeah, and they have a lot of programs, don't they?
Oh yes. Yes, we have educational programs every meeting, September through June. And for example, the one the other day was how to fix your computer. And I guess what, 90% of people who do genealogy have computers?
Oh, yeah.
That's just a ballpark figure, but there are a few who don't. You know.
Yeah, I was at that meeting too, and one of the recommended tools was a leaf blower. So call us up and ask how that figures into it. But anyway, let me see. What's coming up? Oh, let's go on to the Images of America book. That's very, very exciting.
Oh, that's exciting. It really is. It's published by Arcadia Publishing Company, and they have already done more than 8,000 local and regional history titles. This is Images of America to Varies by Bobby Grenier. And so far in the county, we have completed Images of America, Claremont, Groveland, Howey, Tavares, Eustis, Mount Dora, and Umatilla. From the Arcadia Publishing Company website, I copied. They chronicle the history of small towns and downtowns across the country. Each title features more than 200 vintage images. It capture often forgotten bygone times and bring to life people, places, and events that defined a community. And local authors go through dusty albums and artifacts down memory lane. They publish other series too. They have images of rails, aviation, sports, postcards. And now they have a new imprint, Local Legends, which was launched last year.
Okay.
And our Lake County Legendary Locals has gone to press, I believe. It was compiled by Doris Bloodsworth and her sister Connie Fleetwood. And they're out of Claremont and Groveland area.
Oh yeah, I mean, in case you haven't run into these series before, they're excellent. And they bring out a lot of history you wouldn't even suspect. Like my neighborhood is Brooklyn, New York, and way back when some 12,000 British troops landed on its shores to fight George Washington at the Battle of Long Island. And I mean, I lived right next to 3rd Avenue, which was one of the roads they took. And books like that tell you all about stuff like that.
And is there one for Brooklyn?
There's one for Brooklyn, and there's one specifically from my neighborhood, which is called Bay Ridge.
Oh, yes. My mother lived in Bay Ridge when she was growing up.
But according to the census, they said 1 out of every 65 people born in this country were from Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I was going to ask you about, can you tell us a little bit more about how the book relates to Leesburg?
Well, it's one of the oldest towns in Lake County, and we have a very exciting history. Our first pioneer arrived in 1843, but that isn't considered our beginning. Evanderlee arrived in 1857, which is really considered the beginning of our city. But anyway, Leesburg practically demands a place with those other towns. And I had wanted to work on this since 2005, and finally a collaborator came along.
Yay.
And I mentioned him early, Bobby Grenier, who has finished Tavares, and we are going to have Leesburg right here.
Terrific. Yeah, in fact, actually, I've been pressed into service too. I've done research on dating some historic photographs of Leesburg from time to time, which is a lot interesting. It gets very intricate. I think one of them, I said it had to be after 1937 because headlights were still on top of the fenders and in the picture, and later on they were put inside of them, which is really weird stuff. But anyway, you mentioned Bobby Grenier is writing it, and you're writing it, and everybody's putting it together. So can you tell me 1 or 2 things about him?
Well, Bobby is a well-known local author and historian. He wrote about Melton Haynes, who was a very early pioneer. Now, Melton Haynes, well, let me step back a moment. The city of Leesburg was organized in 1875 when we were then the county seat for Sumter County. But then Lake County was created in 1887, in July of 1887. But anyway, Milton Haynes died the first day of January, 1887, and he missed being part of the great change here.
Oh.
But anyway, Bobby discovered his home place and had the house moved to Tavares. And he's just so into the history. He's now president of Lake County Historic Society, and he is part of Tavares Historic Society, and also he's just such a historian.
Oh yeah, and I understand that you have a lot of good pictures in the Heritage Museum that are going to populate this book.
Right, I've been selecting pictures out of the files and providing historical information for the pictures. And that's a little more complicated than it sounds, because suppose I have a picture of you. Well, I've got to find out who you are. And I like to provide Bobby with more information than he's going to use in the book. So I'm finding out when people were born and died, where they were born and died, what kind of work they did, and all sorts of different information for the pictures. So then when he sits down with the pictures, he can look at this and say, okay, well, I need 2 sentences, and I can write this.
Okay.
But it's really being helpful to me, too, because I have been very interested in local history. And so every time I do this, I learn something more.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Now I was wondering, some of the people watching will be really whose families have been here a long time. Could they actually submit a photograph? If not an inclusion in the book, at least for the Heritage Museum?
Oh, that would be wonderful. We have all the pictures now because we've reached our deadline for the pictures, and then it's going into the writing phase. But we do want information for the Heritage Museum. And we are also considering publication of a second book because there is so much information about Leesburg. And it was such an exciting history, as I said earlier. And we are hoping the publisher might agree to a second volume.
All right, that sounds good. And when will it be available?
Well, it's be available in the spring of 2013.
Okay.
The material needs to be to the publisher by the middle of January.
And they go through their editing and promotional process and everything. And yeah, so I know. And of course, I should add that when it does become available, it'll be a lot of outlets for sale. For instance, won't the Heritage Museum actually have copies?
Oh, yeah. Many stores along Main Street, such as the antique stores, the Aladdin's, the library. We're hoping the library bookstore will sell them too.
Okay, and we definitely will buy some for people to check out. So that will be in our Florida room. In case you haven't seen it, it's made to look like an old Florida porch with white clapboard walls and very comfortable rocking chairs. I mean, people tell us, where can I buy this chair? And we have to tell them it's from a commercial supplier. They don't make home chairs and they're very expensive. But it's a very nice place to sit and read a book. But, and now we go on to the Heritage Museum. So what can you, first of all, we should say that it's a 111 South 6th Street between Main and Magnolia. It has a special meaning to the library because many years ago, the Leesburg Library was in that building. It was the Women's Club building. And tell us a little bit about the museum itself.
Well, the museum is in the Women's Club of Leesburg that was built in 1922. The Heritage Society was organized in 1976, and the sitting mayor, Ed Merrill, said to George Rast, why don't we begin to collect artifacts? So George did that, and over the years we've acquired a huge collection. We have so much that isn't even on display right now. We can only use the first floor at this point, and so we try to make changes, make it flow a little bit so that people will come in and see something different when they come.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And you know what, one of the things you oversee is the Moten Morris House. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we give tours on the second Saturday of the month from 10 to 2 at the Moat House. The Moat House was built by Edward Moat. He was a prominent businessman. He was a state senator. He was 8 times mayor. He was fire chief in Leesburg. And he came to Leesburg in 1882. And he had some money so that he was able to become a prominent businessman. He wanted to bring in entertainment, vaudeville, opera, that kinds of thing. And he wanted to build a building. And they said, okay, but first you have to build us a nice hotel. Well, General Grant came to town and said it's nice, but it's all wood buildings.
Yeah.
So the city wanted some brick buildings. And they wanted a good hotel the next time General Grant came, if he did. So he built this, and then he was able to build the Opera House. And then he built the Moat House for his wife in 1892. It cost $9,000, and it's beautiful. It still has a large number of the original windows, which you can see the imperfections in the windows. It was moved in 1990 from next to the Methodist Church.
Okay.
And now it's on Magnolia, at the corner 12th and Magnolia. And as I said, we are open. The house was added to the National Register in 1974. And the house is available for rent, for weddings, for parties, and all sorts of different functions. It is owned by the city, and so you rent through the city. So on the days we give, well, we also have the house open when there's any events by the city or by the partnership in the park next to the house. We will be open for Beast Feast, and the people can come and walk through the house without a tour, and some of the other activities that we have there in that park. And so people can enjoy the house without the tour at the same time. What else did I want to tell you? Well, come by and learn some history.
Oh, yeah.
Have you been there?
No, every time I've tried to get there, I haven't made it. You know, I definitely will get, I pass by it every day.
Do you?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful house. It's one of the best examples of its type because in Brooklyn, we're no slouches in Victorian homes either. And I also lived in a town in New Jersey called Metuchen, which had a lot of similar type architecture. And so, you know, it compares very favorably. I mean, $9,000 would be something like maybe $200,000 today.
Oh, more.
Or even more, yeah, $200,000-300,000.
The floors were pine.
Oh, yeah.
And still original looking.
Okay, but now, does the museum accept donations to help keep it running?
We are in a building that's owned by the city, and the city provides us with our utilities and all those various things. We could use donations such as papers, family histories, even an artifact, but we do limit ourselves to Leesburg and surrounding areas such as Oklahoma, Fruitland Park, and that kind of thing. Over east, out 44, that we consider that part of Leesburg area.
Yeah.
So we do accept donations of any items and money if people wanted to, but we're not in great need since the city does give us a lot of.
Oh, yeah, but it is a not-for-profit corporation.
Right, we're a 501c3.
Okay, and so, you know, what plans do you have for the museum in the future?
We're going to continue to ask for and collect local history, and we're going to preserve it as best we can.
Okay, so we're almost near the end. Do you have any final thoughts about anything we've spoke about today? Is anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just thought I'd say that over the years we were asked if we had any published information about the city, and until our sesquicentennial in 2007, we didn't. And then we published a book, and I think that our images will be a fine companion for that book.
Oh, yeah, and actually the book she's talking about, it's in the library. It's really a very nicely put together book, but this Images of America will definitely give more dimension to it. Well, thanks a lot, Glorianne.
Thank
We
you,
had
Tom.
a lot of fun today. This is about all the time we've got today, but if you have any questions about the Heritage Museum, you can call them. They're in the book.
No, I'm sorry to contradict you, but they have never corrected our number.
Oh, yeah, they haven't?
No, they
still
haven't. It's 315-1800.
Okay. Yeah, remember that. And another thing is you can always call the library at 352-728-9790, and we can tell you about genealogy after hours, beginning genealogy, and anything else in that line that we're doing. So, please don't hesitate to call us, and thank you very much.